They say the Arctic keeps its secrets buried under the ice secrets, older than history, older than the world we know. When I signed up for that research mission, I thought I was just chasing data temperatures, migration patterns, numbers on a screen. But what we found out there wasn't a discovery. It was a reminder that some things were meant to stay frozen. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I tell this story before the silence buries it again. This is what we found beneath the ice. This is the polar hand. They say the Arctic changes you, not because of the cold or the silence, but because of what the silence lets in. I used to think that was poetic nonsense until the day we found the bear. 5 months into the season, everything had become mechanical. Wake at 0600, check data logs, tag, weigh, sedate, record, release. It wasn't adventure anymore. It was repetition carved into our bones. We'd grown so used to the rhythm that fear had no place left to live. The wind had dropped that morning. The air was still enough that you could hear the crunch of snow from half a mile away. A perfect day for fieldwork. When the bear wandered close to the coast, we got lucky. I remember the dart sinking clean into its shoulder, the muffled thud against all that white silence. The animal barely reacted. It staggered once, exhaled a fog of steam, and went down slow quiet, as if surrendering to the snow itself. Amara gave me a thumbs up. Lars muttered something about textbook efficiency. I didn't answer. I'd already pulled the equipment bag open and stepped closer to take measurements. That's when Amara frowned. Guys, at first I thought she'd found an old wound or maybe frostbite scars. But when I brushed aside the thick fur, I saw the metal. The bear already had a collar, not one of ours. It was old, impossibly old. Brass eaten green, with corrosion edges hammered by hand, not machine. Whoever made it didn't just tag the bear, they forged the thing shut around its neck. There was no way to remove it without killing the animal. Etched into the surface was a date, 1847. Beneath it, something else, a spiral. Not a neat one like a child's doodle, but a pattern that made my eyes ache when I tried to follow it. The lines doubled back on themselves, looping in a way that defied sense. My vision swam. I looked away. "This has to be a joke," Daniel said behind me. "Sure," Amara replied, "because Inuit trappers were out here hammering brass in the 1800s, right?" No one laughed. We finished our examination in silence. Blood samples, measurements, routine. But something in that still air had shifted. When we packed up, the bear still hadn't moved. The drug should have kept it down for at least an hour. After 15 minutes, its eyes opened. Not the sluggish flutter of sedation, deliberate, slow aware. It rose to its feet as though nothing had happened. I froze. The dart gun hung limp in my hand, useless now. The bear didn't growl. It didn't charge. It just stood there watching. And then we backed away, step by step. It didn't follow. When we reached the skidoo, I glanced over my shoulder one last time. The bear was still there, black eyes fixed on us, steam curling from its nose into the twilight. I thought that was the end of it. But Amara, staring into the horizon, whispered something that still haunts me. Maybe it wanted us to find it. That night, no one spoke much. Even back at camp, where the generators hummed and the wind scratched at the aluminum siding, the silence between us carried weight. We'd all seen strange things in the field, malformed ice ridges, mirages that turned mountains into ghosts, but nothing like that collar. I remember uploading the day's data into the central server the progress bar crawling along the bottom of the screen. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Every time I blinked, I saw that spiral burned into the back of my eyelids. Amara was the first to break the quiet. She'd taken her laptop to the mess tent, surrounded by half-drained mugs of instant coffee and the endless buzz of the satellite uplink. I checked every expedition registry, she said, eyes flicking between PDFs. Royal Navy, Soviet surveys, whalers, even private ventures. No record of anyone operating this far north in 1847. Maybe it was a joke Lars offered, though he didn't sound like he believed it, or an artifact that drifted here somehow. Amara shook her head, then explained the caller still being on a living bear. Explain why it looks sealed. Her words hung there, suspended in the stale air. I didn't want to admit what I'd been thinking since we left that frozen clearing, that the bear hadn't been tagged at all. It had been bound. By midnight, most of the crew turned in. Amara didn't. When I came back from logging the tranquilizer dosage, I found her still bent over her screen, the glow of the monitor reflected in her eyes. She'd gone deep Royal Society archives, old letters, anything digitized by accident. And somehow, she found one. It wasn't an expedition report. It was a letter, nearly unreadable. The ink had bled into the paper words, collapsing into smudges, but the signature at the bottom was clear: Dr. Thaddeus Knox, Royal Arctic Survey, 1847. But there was no Dr. Knox in any list of naval officers, scientists, or cartographers of the period. No record of his existence at all. Attached to the letter was a scanned map, crude, hand-drawn, but unmistakable. Our coastline, our coordinates, the northern shelf, a century before it was ever officially charted. In the center, where the ace flattened into nothing, a single phrase had been written in precise Latin script, umbra transitio, shadow crossing, and below it, in English, the White King endures. I stared at those words until the lines blurred. The date on the letter matched the one etched into the bear's collar. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. No expedition was here in 1847. The maps didn't exist. The tools didn't exist. And yet, Knox had drawn the coast, as if he'd stood where we stood, looking out across the same stretch of ice. When I looked up, Amara was watching me. "You see it too, don't you?" she whispered. "What?" "The pattern. The spiral on the collar. It's on the map." She traced the ink lines with her fingertip, following the loops inward until they converged at the center, right where Knox had written the words, "Shadow Crossing." Something about that moment felt wrong. The tent lights flickered, once the kind of faint brownout you get before a storm, except there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Outside, the wind had died completely. The Arctic is never truly silent. There's always the crack of ice, the groan of pressure shifting miles away. But that night, it was as if the world had stopped breathing. When I finally tried to sleep, the silence followed me into my dreams. I kept seeing the bear standing alone on the snow, motionless, watching the sky, and above it, a faint spiral burned into the aurora, glowing like an open eye. And somewhere beneath all that ice, something listened back. The map wouldn't leave my mind. Even after I shut the laptop, its lines stayed burned behind my eyes, like the afterimage of a flashbulb. A spiral etched into paper a century and a half before we were born, matching the one carved into the brass around that bear's throat. For a long time, I sat there listening to the hum of the heater, trying to pretend I didn't feel the weight of something ancient pressing down from the ceiling. When sleep finally came, it was shallow and fevered. I dreamed of white shapes circling beneath the ice. By morning, Amara had printed the map. She spread it across the mess table, her fingers trembling slightly, despite the warmth of her gloves. "Look at this," she said. "Every coastline's accurate, every fjord, every ridge." This wasn't guesswork. Lars leaned over her shoulder. "You're saying Knox mapped this region before it was ever discovered?" "I'm saying he was here," she whispered. "Somehow." The map wasn't just a chart. It was a message. Dozens of faint symbols ringed the spiral triangles, lined small circles that almost looked like stars. In the center where the spiral ended, Knox had scrawled one more note in uneven English. "The gradient holds, the White King endures." Daniel scoffed, trying to sound casual. "What the hell does that even mean?" But no one answered. When Amara overlaid the coordinates on our modern digital maps, the room fell silent. The spot Knox had marked wasn't on land. It was out on the sea ice, miles from any recorded formation. Nothing there. Flat, featureless white. "Maybe he saw a mirage," Lars muttered. Amara didn't look up. Or maybe whatever he found isn't gone. That was the moment the idea took root to go there, to see it for ourselves. It started as a half-joke, the kind of insane curiosity that thrives in isolation. But as the hours passed and the storm forecast cleared, the idea hardened into a plan. We'd take minimal gear. 2 sled-mounted drones, just enough rations for a quick survey. A day trip, nothing more. Before we left, I caught Amara staring at the bear's file on her screen. "You think this is connected?" I said. I don't think she replied. "I know. That collar didn't survive 170 years by accident." She paused, then added quietly, "And maybe the bear didn't either." We loaded the sleds at dawn. The air was razor cold, dry enough to sting your lungs. I remember the horizon stretching out, endless white. No sky, no ground, just one color that devoured everything. Half a mile out, I stopped. Something dark broke the monotony ahead. It was the bear, the same one, standing motionless in the snow, its collar glinting faintly in the pale light. It didn't move when we started the engines, didn't flinch at the roar. It only turned its head slightly as we passed, eyes fixed on the sky, as if watching something we couldn't see. And I swear, as the skidoo rumbled over the ice, I felt it watching long after the horizon swallowed it. When the GPS finally chimed our arrival, there was nothing. No ridge, no shadow, no sign of life, just wind and white, until the light shifted. The low sun caught the ice at just the right angle, and the surface betrayed itself. The snow curved inward, subtle but precise ridges, coiling into a shape that stretched for hundreds of feet. A spiral. The same spiral that Knox had drawn, the same one carved into brass and burned into my memory. And at its heart, something black broke through the snow. A slab of stone, polished, seamless, wrong. Not rock, not ice, something else. Amara knelt beside it, brushing away frost with her glove. The surface was slick, almost oily, and the snow wouldn't stick to it. Every other patch of ice around us glittered with frost, but this stayed clean dry, untouched, like it rejected the cold itself. We stood there for a long time, just breathing. Then Lars whispered, "What the hell is this place?" Amara didn't answer. She only whispered back, "Knox found it, and he left it marked." She turned to me, eyes wide, pupils, tiny pinpricks in the sunlight. "Do you feel that?" At first, I thought she meant the cold, but then I noticed it too. The air was heavier, thicker, like we were standing in the vacuum left by something enormous that had just exhaled. And somewhere beneath our boots, the ice moved. The spiral stayed with us long after we left it. Back at camp, I could still feel it coiled somewhere beneath my ribs, turning slowly, patiently. Like it wasn't just a pattern carved in the ice, but a direction. We tried to rationalize what we'd seen. Lars insisted it was a rare geological depression formed by wind and melt over time. Daniel thought it was man-made, some Cold War relic. Amara said nothing. She just kept staring at the data feeds, her face ghost pale in the glow of the monitor. The next morning, she had already made the call. "We go back," she said. No one argued, though none of us wanted to admit why. We packed light emergency kits, thermal drones rations, for 2 days. I tried to tell myself it was scientific curiosity, that we were just chasing data. But when I caught Amara watching me across the prep table, I saw the same quiet dread in her eyes that lived in mine. Out on the flat white, the world felt thinner. The horizon blurred until you couldn't tell where sky ended and ice began. Even the wind sounded different, hollow, like it was echoing from somewhere deep below. By the time we reached the coordinates again, the sun was low, staining the snow gold. The spiral waited for us, perfect as before. No drifts had covered it, no sign of melting. It was as if the world had agreed to preserve it. We circled down into it, sleds crunching softly over the ridges. The deeper we went, the quieter it became. Sound seemed to fall away, muffled by the shape of the ice itself. At the center, the black slab still gleamed snowless. Steam drifted faintly from its edges, though the air was 20 below. Lars approached first, kneeling with a handheld spectrometer. "Stone like this doesn't exist here," he murmured. "It's metamorphic, maybe basalt, but with metal traces. It was brought here." By who, I asked. He didn't answer. We began setting up the drone. Amara's movements were quick, precise, but I could see her hands shaking. When she powered it on, the screen flickered with static. GPS feeds scrambled compass readings, spinning like a roulette wheel. Then the ground shifted. A deep, slow groan beneath us, so low it was almost felt, not heard. Everyone froze. The ice didn't crack, but something beneath it moved. A slow, deliberate flex, like pressure adjusting. The drone camera caught it first, just a blur, a change in the light under the surface. A shape, massive and indistinct, gliding through the frozen layers like something swimming below glass. "Turn it off," Lars whispered. Amara didn't move. She was staring past the drone, eyes wide. At the edge of the spiral, half shrouded in drifting snow, stood the bear. The collar caught the dying sun, gleaming faintly green. And behind it, higher up on the ridge, another shape. Then a third. 3 bears still as statues watching us. I couldn't breathe. My instincts screamed to back away, to run, but none of us moved. "They're not hunting," Amara said, her voice barely a whisper. "They're guarding." The wind picked up, then sweeping across the depression with a low wail that sounded almost like a voice. When it passed, we were alone again. The ridge was empty, the bears were gone. But their prints remained circling the spiral. Perfect, deliberate rings in the snow, and all of them pointed inward, toward the slab, toward us. That was when I realized what the spiral really was. Not a pattern, not a mark of discovery, a warning. We should have left that day. Every instinct screamed it. The storm warnings, the drone malfunctions, the way the bears vanished without a trace. Every sign told us the ice didn't want us there. But curiosity has a way of feeling like gravity. It pulls, and you follow. no matter how much the ground groans beneath your feet. The next morning, we went back. The air was sharp, brittle enough that even breathing hurt. Amara walked ahead, scanning the slab with the handheld imager. Lars followed with a coarse sampler, muttering about density anomalies. I trailed behind, watching our footprints vanish in the drifting snow. We didn't see the crack until it happened. A single deafening snap, and the world dropped out from under us. Lars and Daniel went first, their screams cutting short as the ice collapsed inward. The snow folded over itself, burying them in a white blur. Amara fell to her knees, reaching out as the ground split wider between us. I heard the sound like fabric tearing, but deeper, wetter. Then silence. Rope, she shouted already, unspooling the emergency line. We anchored it to the sled and crawled to the edge. The hole was steep, about 20 meters down, funneling into darkness. The walls gleamed like glass, smooth and wrong, as though the ice had been shaped by hands, not weather. Daniel's I yelled. My voice echoed strangely too flat, as if the air below swallowed sound. A groan answered back. Then another. We went down one by one, harnessed to the rope boots, scraping against the slick walls. The light from our headlamps fractured, bouncing in directions that didn't make sense. The deeper we went, the colder it became, not biting cold, but something denser, heavy like pressure instead of temperature. When I reached the bottom, I found Lars half buried in snow, clutching his ankle. His face was pale, lips trembling. It's not broken. He gasped, just twisted. The tunnel around us was huge. Smooth ice stretched in every direction, glistening with faint veins of black running through it. It didn't look natural. It looked built. Amara crouched by the wall, brushing her glove across it. This isn't glacial, she whispered. This was carved. We followed the tunnel downward. It twisted gently, spiraling, like the pattern we'd seen above. Every few meters, the ice changed color, pale blue, then green, then almost clear. That's when we started finding things. A boot, old leather, hand-stitched, frozen stiff. A broken pickaxe, its handle wrapped in sealskin. Fragments of cloth, so old they crumbled at our touch. Someone had been here before. Amara lifted a rusted lantern from the ice, the wick still visible. 19th century, she murmured. Knox's Hera. The tunnel widened into a chamber, and for a moment, all I could do was stare. The walls curved in perfect symmetry, smooth and glistening, but the reflections didn't behave right. The light didn't bounce, it folded, every angle bent slightly, as though the ice itself refused to obey geometry. It made me dizzy just looking at it. Lars muttered something about crystalline distortion, but I could tell by his voice he didn't believe his own words. In the center of the chamber, something stood, half buried, a row of slabs, dark green-black stone, like the one on the surface. Each one perfectly cut, arranged in precise rows, like coffins, lined for inspection. No carvings, no writing, just shapes leaning at impossible angles, as if someone had tried to think in stone. This wasn't a cave, Amara said softly. It's a structure. She was right. And somewhere above us, the spiral of the surface seemed to pulse faintly in my memory, turning breathing, alive. When the drone's camera blinked back on it, showed static for a heartbeat, then the faint outline of a corridor leading deeper into the ice. Amara turned to me. We keep going, she said, and I nodded, because I couldn't think of a single reason not to. We had already fallen this far. The tunnel narrowed again, forcing us to walk single file. Every sound we made came back wrong, footsteps echoing half a second too late, breaths stretching out longer than they should. Even the static from our radios thinned until it was just a faint hiss, like the sound of wind trapped inside a shell. After a while, the slope leveled out. The ice here wasn't blue anymore. It was black. A deep, wet darkness that gleamed under our headlamps like frozen oil. I didn't want to touch it, but Lars ran his gloved hand across the wall anyway. "It's warm," he whispered. That shouldn't have been possible. We followed the tunnel another 50 meters before it opened up. And then we saw it. A chamber vast enough that our lights couldn't find the far wall. The air hung heavy, pressing against our suits, and every sound seemed to vanish before it could echo. At the center of that silence was something so massive, it broke my sense of scale. A shape pressed against the far wall of the ice, pale and ridged with pressure cracks. At first, I thought it was a rock formation. Then my eyes adjusted. It was a hand, not human. Each finger was as long as a man's nails, like curved ridges of horn worn smooth by time. The skin beneath the ice was white, no, not white, colorless, like something that had never seen light. Amara stood beside me silent. Lars took a step forward, his headlamp beam tracing along one enormous finger. "Jesus," he whispered. It's alive." The beam caught movement, a tremor in the ice. Not much, just a pulse-like pressure shifting beneath the surface. But it was enough. The ice was holding it. Barely. Veins of melt water trickled down its length, gleaming black under the lights. Scattered around the chamber were remnants of metal scaffolds, lantern frames, wooden braces fossilized in frost, some modern, some impossibly old. It looked like every expedition that ever reached this place had left something behind, then vanished. Amara crouched by a corroded plate, half buried in ice. She scraped it clean with her knife until the letters showed through. "It is not dead. It is cold. The earth must not thaw." My throat went dry. "What the hell is this?" Lars breathed. A grave, I wanted to say yes. But graves are meant to hold the dead. This didn't feel dead. Amara found more of them. Then collars just like the one on the bear frozen into the walls like offerings. Dozens, each etched with the same spiral. "They're binding it," she murmured, holding it in place. Her hand brushed one of the collars and came away slick with moisture. Beneath the brass, the ice was melting. We all backed away. The air seemed to vibrate low, constant a sound. You felt more than heard. I thought it was the wind at first. Then I realized there was no wind down here. The vibration came from the wall, from behind it. Lars raised his light, and for one terrible moment, I thought I saw the faint outline of something enormous shifting in the black. "Turn it off," Amara hissed. Now the beam vanished, plunging us into near darkness. Only the soft green shimmer of the ice remained. And beneath that surface, just for an instant, I saw movement. Slow, intentional. The hand flexed, only once. But that was enough to send the snow falling from the ceiling, whispering down like ash. We ran. No one spoke until we reached the rope. Lars was panting, white-eyed, clutching his injured ankle. Amara kept glancing over her shoulder, like she expected the ice itself to reach for us. When we finally hauled ourselves out into the open air, the sky above was a wash of green aurora. Beautiful, silent, too silent. The wind had stopped again, and when I turned towards the ridge, I saw them. The bears, at least a dozen, sitting in the snow, spaced in perfect circles around the spiral, watching the sky, waiting. Amara's voice cracked as she spoke. "They're not guarding it," she said. They're guarding us because it's waking up. And somewhere deep below the ice, the earth exhaled. We didn't sleep that night. How could we? The air around camp felt charged heavy enough that every breath hurt to take. Even the aurora overhead had changed no longer, shifting ribbons of green but thin vertical streaks that hung still like frozen rain. Amara sat by the data console, replaying the drone footage over and over. I told her to stop, but she wouldn't. Every time the video glitched, her eyes lit up. "Look," she whispered. "You see it? The shadow behind the hand. It's not just pressure moving the ice. It's responding to what I asked." She looked at me for a long moment. To us. Lars was quiet, cradling his swollen ankle, muttering about magnetic fields and seismic tension. Daniel couldn't stop pacing. I couldn't blame him. Every few minutes, the ground under the tents gave a faint shudder, like something enormous shifting below. By morning, the temperature had risen 5 degrees impossible. This far north, this fast. The ice shouldn't melt that quickly. But outside, the snow had thinned the surface, slick with water that steamed faintly in the cold air. We packed to leave. No one said the word retreat, but that's what it was. And then we saw them. At the edge of the ridge, the bears had returned. Not just a few dozens now. White figures standing in perfect arcs around the spiral, motionless, silent. Amara froze. "They're not letting us go." Daniel reached for his rifle hands, shaking. "Put it down," I told him. "They're not attacking." He didn't listen. He raised it halfway before the closest bear lifted its head. Just a tilt, slow, deliberate. And Daniel froze like his muscles had turned to stone. We didn't move. None of them did. Then, without a sound, they stepped aside, creating a path that led back down toward the spiral's center. "They want us to go back," Amara whispered. "They're leading us." Lars cursed under his breath. "You're insane if you think." But Amara was already walking her boots, crunching on the ice. I followed because at that point, reason had stopped mattering. The spiral looked different now. The ridges had softened the black slab, in the middle half submerged in meltwater. Steam curled up around it, carrying a metallic scent, not rust, something older. The air shimmered. The ice beneath our feet hummed like a living thing. When we reached the slab, the sound grew stronger, resonant, almost rhythmic. And then deep below, something answered. A low guttural pulse rolled through the ice. The water rippled. Amara knelt by the edge, her voice barely a whisper. "It's calling the Guardians." The words made no sense, and yet they did. The bears above the ridge shifted as one turning toward the sky. Their breaths plumed in the air like smoke signals. I stared at the ice, watching it fracture hairline cracks, spreading outward from the slab. Beneath the surface, the darkness moved, slowly, purposefully. Lars backed away. "We have to go." But Amara was still kneeling. "No, this isn't random. This was built by them, by Nox, by whoever came before. They weren't studying it. They were maintaining it." I grabbed her arm. "Amara, listen to me. It's waking up." Her eyes met mine. "Exactly." The next sound was deafening, a sharp, echoing crack that shook the ground. A fissure tore open beside the slab, spilling black water that steamed against the snow. The ice glowed faintly green from below, lighting the spiral like a beacon. The hand beneath the glacier had moved again. This time, it didn't stop. We stumbled back towards the ridge snow, sliding beneath our boots. The air buzzed with static, our radios shrieking with bursts of white noise. Somewhere behind us, the bears roared, not in anger, but in unison. A chorus. a warning. At the top of the ridge, I turned one last time. Through the steam, I saw the slab-tilt ice shattering around it. A faint shape began to emerge, massive, coiled wrong. Amara was still standing at the center of the spiral, staring down into the fissure, as though she understood something the rest of us didn't. When the wind howled again, I could have sworn I heard her voice carried with it. "It's not the bears that guard the hand," she said. "It's the hand that keeps them." And then, the light from below went out. The storm came in faster than we could pack. One minute, the horizon was a sheet of white light. The next, it was swallowed whole by darkness and snow. The wind screamed against the tents, pulling at the lines like fingers clawing to get inside. We should have left earlier. We all knew it. But Amara wouldn't move. She sat by the fissure eyes, fixed on the black water, still steaming at the spiral's heart. The heat coming off it was unnatural, thick, humid, alive. Lars was shouting over the wind, trying to start the skidoo. Daniel was throwing gear onto the sled, muttering about finding the plane and leaving her behind if we had to. But I couldn't. I couldn't walk away. I remember crouching beside her, the snow biting through my gloves. "Amara, please. Whatever's down there, it isn't ours to fix." She didn't look at me. Her voice was calm. Too calm. "It's not about fixing it. It's about keeping it from spreading." The ground shook again, not the way ice usually does, cracking or groaning. This was deeper, like something exhaling under pressure. A heartbeat, slow and heavy. The fissure widened, spilling more black water that steamed in the cold. Beneath it, shapes moved, curved, pulsing lines of light that vanished as soon as they appeared. "The gradient holds," Amara murmured, repeating Knox's words. But not for long. Then she turned to me, her face ghost white in the stormlight. "They brought us here for a reason. Don't you understand? Every time the seal weakens, it calls the Guardians. But they can't rebuild it. Only we can." Her eyes shone wet, but not from the wind. "Someone has to stay." I shook my head. "We'll come back. We'll bring real equipment." "No," she whispered. "If the ice melts before that, it won't matter." Another shudder rolled through the ground. The slab in the center cracked with a sharp, echoing sound. For a heartbeat, I saw what lay beneath skin, slick with light veins, glowing like molten glass. The air tasted of metal. The sky above us flickered green and white, the aurora twisting into a perfect spiral overhead. Daniel screamed from the ridge. "It's collapsing. We have to move." But Amara didn't move. She took one of the brass collars from her pack, one we'd chipped from the wall below, and held it against her chest like a relic. "If this holds, don't come back," she said softly. Then she turned toward the fissure. I lunged forward, but Lars caught me, his injured leg buckling under the weight. "Don't," he gasped. "You'll both die." I looked at him, then back at her. She was already walking into the spiral, the snow swirling around her like smoke. The bears appeared on the ridges again, dozens, maybe hundreds, silent watching. As she stepped into the circle, they lowered their heads, almost in reverence. When she reached the center, she knelt and pressed the collar against the fractured slab. A blinding flash burst from the fissure, white, then green, then black. The sound was indescribable, not loud, but deep, a vibration that tore through my ribs and settled behind my eyes. And then, just as suddenly, everything went still. The wind stopped, the ice stopped shaking, the aurora froze mid-twist above us. Where Amara had stood, the spiral had smoothed over a thin sheet of new ice, gleaming faintly under the frozen sky. Daniel started crying. Lars just stared. None of us spoke as we climbed back to the sleds. The bears stayed where they were, unmoving their breath, misting in slow, steady rhythm. They weren't guarding the spiral anymore. They were guarding her. We left as the first flakes began to fall again, sealing our tracks behind us. And as the storm swallowed the horizon, I thought I heard her voice, soft, distant, and impossibly calm. It's holding. When we reached the plain, the sky was a wall of grey. Snow drifted sideways across the strip, and every sound felt damp and distant. No one spoke as we loaded the sleds. Not even Daniel. Not even Lars. I remember looking back one last time as the engines roared to life. The spiral was already fading beneath the snow, erased as quickly as it had appeared. Only the ridge remained lined with silent, motionless shapes. The bears, watching. They didn't follow as we lifted off. They only stood there, heads lowered still, like mourners at a funeral. The flight back was quiet. Lars kept his eyes shut the whole time, clutching his ankle. Daniel just stared out the window, jaw clenched, muttering to himself. I watched the ice stretch endlessly below us, that unbroken white, so peaceful. You'd never guess what slept beneath it. When the base came into view, I felt something break inside me. Relief maybe, or denial. I don't know. We landed at dusk. The storm had followed us south, painting the horizon black. By the time we'd hauled our gear inside, the debrief officers were already waiting. 3 of them. Uniforms crisp, expressions flat. Lars went first. He stuck to the story we'd agreed on: partial collapse, failed retrieval, 1 casualty. Amara lost in a crevasse. Conditions: unstable recovery, impossible. Daniel told the same story, his voice shaking just enough to make it believable. When it was my turn, I tried to speak, but my throat felt dry. They asked for coordinates, for incident details, for confirmation of death. I said the words. I signed the forms. And with every line of ink, I buried the truth a little deeper. Afterward, one of the officers offered me coffee. I stared at the steam rising from the cup and thought of the breath of that thing beneath the ice. The way it pulsed, the way the bears bowed. He said, "You did the right thing." These conditions claim lives every year. I wanted to tell him about the vault, about the callers, about how she hadn't screamed when she went under because she knew. But I didn't. Not because I was afraid they wouldn't believe me, but because I was terrified they would. That they'd send drones, or drills, or bombs, and they'd crack the ice open again. So I stayed silent. Weeks passed. We filed reports, went through the motions, ate, slept, pretended. The others started to adjust. Lars was given a desk position until his leg healed. Daniel put in for transfer to a southern research vessel. Everyone moved on, except me. Every night I woke up to the same sound, faint, distant, rhythmic, like something knocking softly through miles of ice. Sometimes I dream of her, standing at the edge of the spiral, her hair whipping in the wind, whispering words I couldn't hear. I tried to convince myself it was guilt, trauma. Maybe it was. But the feeling didn't fade. It grew stronger, like a signal waiting for someone to listen. Then one night it came through. I was alone in the com tent, filing data into the archive. The radio console hummed, quietly tuned to emergency frequencies. Out of habit, I reached for the old dial, the one we'd used in the field. It was still set to our private channel. I don't know why I turned it on. Maybe I just wanted to hear static again, something familiar. At first, that's all there was. White noise, faint bursts of interference. Then a pattern. 3 short clicks, a pause, then one long, and then a voice. Faint, cracked, but hers. I'm here. My heart nearly stopped. I leaned closer, every nerve in my body screaming. Amara, are you alive? There was a long silence, just the hiss of static, the soft pop of interference. Then the bears provide. The transmission fractured, looping, fading in and out. Her voice sounded further away, each time thinner, distorted, until it barely sounded human. I shouted into the receiver, begging her to respond. Nothing. Just static. And then, as the signal died completely, I heard one last whisper, too faint to tell if it came from her or somewhere deeper beneath the noise. It's holding. I haven't told anyone. The official reports are sealed. The base commander says the region's off limits, now unstable ice. But I know better. I still check the radio sometimes. The channel is quiet most nights. But once, when the temperature dropped low enough and the wind came from the north, I heard something else. A pulse. Slow, deep, steady. Like a heartbeat frozen beneath the world. And somewhere out there under a sky no one dares to cross, she's still there. Holding. It's been months since the ice. Since Amara. Since I heard her voice slip through the static like something barely human. I thought I'd moved on. The reports were done, the funding cut, the Arctic declared unstable and sealed off to civilian research. They buried everything under bureaucracy and snow. But the silence followed me home. Even now, in my apartment, hundreds of miles away, I wake to the same sound, something low and constant, like a heartbeat, pulsing through the pipes. I tell myself, it's just the wind. That's what I always tell myself. Last week, I found the radio. The same field transceiver we used in the expedition. I'd boxed it up with the rest of my equipment, planning to sell it. But when I turned it over, the power light blinked once faint green, as if it remembered. I shouldn't have powered it on. The first thing I noticed was the channel preset, 1947 Menards. That wasn't one of ours. It wasn't any known emergency frequency either. But the moment I tuned in, the static changed. Not random noise, a pattern. 3 short bursts, too long. Then silence. It repeated every 20 seconds. I knew it before I admitted it to myself. Those were the same intervals from the last transmission I'd heard from her. Amara. I waited through 4 cycles before I heard the voice. Do you copy? The words were faint, broken by static, but undeniably hers. I froze. Amara, I whispered. How are you? How are you talking to me? Static answered first. Then her voice, again distant, dragged through miles of ice and air. It's holding. For now. My throat tightened. Where are you? She didn't answer directly. Her tone was different, this time flat, almost rehearsed. The gradient holds, the seal reformed, the pressure keeps, the White King endures. Amara, listen to me, I said, shaking. We're coming for you. Just tell me when. No. The word was sharp, clear, cutting through the noise. You can't come back. None of you can. It remembers. Her voice cracked then, like a whisper from underwater. It dreams of warmth. Static roared, then quiet. I should have turned it off, but I couldn't. I kept listening until the power light dimmed. When it did, the silence in my apartment felt wrong. Too complete. That night, I dreamed of the spiral again, only this time it wasn't carved in ice. It was burned into the sky, vast and green, turning slowly above the horizon. At its center stood the bears. Dozens of them, collars gleaming faintly, eyes fixed on something beyond the aurora. And Amara was there too. Or what was left of her. Not human anymore, but something between the cold and the light. Watching, waiting. When I woke, the radio was still on. The green light pulsing faintly. I pressed my ear close, barely breathing. For a moment I heard nothing. Then very faintly beneath the static, something that wasn't a voice at all. A slow, deep rhythm. A pulse, like the sound of something enormous, breathing beneath miles of frozen sea. And through the hiss, one last whisper slipped through. Not hers. Older, heavier, speaking words that felt wrong in my head. The earth warms, the lock thins, the hand remembers. Then the radio died. I haven't turned it back on. But sometimes late at night, when the world is quiet enough, I swear I still hear it in the walls. A faint knocking, slow, steady, patient. And I wonder if it's really the sound of pipes cooling, or if it's the ice. Breathing. Waiting for me to answer. If you're hearing this, then it's still holding. The ice, the seal, the thing beneath, it's all still asleep for now. But warmth spreads fast. So does curiosity. And if they ever send another expedition out there, if anyone ever tries to dig where we did remember her words, it's holding. For now. Because if the ice breaks again, the silence won't come from the cold. It'll come from everything that follows. This is NightLore. Sleep well if you can.